we are going to start with this roundtable. There is no everybody here, but in order to not delay more, we are going to start. My name is María Jesús Villamide, and I am the deputy head of this school in International Affairs. So for me, it's a pleasure to represent my school in this case, to give the welcome to our guest, main of them from Nigeria, and also the professor come from United States. I'm going to present the components of this round table, and then they are going to start. The first one is Eva Iglesias. Eva Iglesias is a professor from this school, so most of you meet her almost every day. She is the responsible of the platform from Africa of the UPM. And also she belongs to the agricultural economy department. To my left is Mohamed Obham, the professor Mohamed Obham. He is the executive director of the National Agricultural Extension and Research Liaison Services of the Nigeria. He is professor of Ahmadu Bello University in Zaria. Thank you very much. And to my right is Professor Richard Cohn. He is a professor in the University of Maryland in Ruminant Nutrition and Bioenergy Department of Animal and Avian Science. So first of all, Eva Iglesias is going to present us the project of TAIFA project, but the title is Transforming Irrigation in Northern Nigeria, Converting Threats into Opportunity to Improve Livelihood of Local Communities. When you want, the floor is yours.
Thank you, María Jesús. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for being here. Let me start telling a bit about the reason that we are here. The reason is that we have a meeting for a project, a World Bank funded project, which is this TAIFA project that some of you already know about. And we have a year meeting, so we took this chance to organize this roundtable and present to you some of our findings of the TAIFA project, and also have the opportunity. We have Professor Othman here, so I think it will be a very interesting opportunity to hear his talk about what are, for our school, the challenges and the opportunities for a sustainable agriculture in Nigeria, which is the roadmap ahead. And also Professor Cohn, which is our team leader, and is like the technological component of this project. So let me start. I think my presentation is in English, but since my partners already know most of this content, I think I will turn to Spanish. Anyone also can follow in English. So let me start with this project. This is our logo. Sorry, este es nuestro logo. Este logo es la TIFA y queremos ilustrar con este logo el enfoque de bioeconomía y economía circular que está en la raíz del proyecto. Como os decía, es un proyecto que está financiado por el World Bank y soportado por el Ministerio de Recursos de Agua, el Ministerio de Nigeria. Es un enfoque, perdonad que voy acá, es un proyecto internacional que coordina la UPM y en el que participa la Universidad de Maryland en Estados Unidos, en Washington, y dos socios en Nigeria. Uno es NILES, que es el Servicio de Extensión Agraria nacional, uno de los servicios nacionales de extensión agraria ligado a la Universidad de Ahmadu Bello, un servicio muy importante, un partner muy importante. Y también tenemos una universidad joven muy cerca de nuestra zona de estudio, que es la Universidad de Gasúa. Sus respectivos team leaders, investigadores principales, están hoy aquí con nosotros. Entonces, dejadme empezar primero con cuál es el contexto de este proyecto y cuál es la motivación y el enfoque del proyecto. El contexto lo provee, como sabéis, las inversiones en regadío han sido como un poco la punta de lanza al desarrollo rural. Esto también ha pasado en Nigeria. Estamos trabajando en la parte norte de Nigeria, en la parte que ya pertenece a Sahel, a África subsahariana, con una época seca muy marcada y donde a finales de los años 90, principios de los 2000, se han efectuado importantes inversiones en regadío como para promover el desarrollo, luchar contra la pobreza y contribuir a la seguridad alimentaria. Sin embargo, años más tarde, resulta que la productividad de estos regadíos y el alcance está muy por debajo de lo esperado y parte de la razón es la invasión del crecimiento descontrolado de una macrofita, es una planta acuática que se conoce como tifa spp, o cattail, y que en España es el nombre senea. La conocéis algunos porque se hacen muchos muebles o sillas con esta planta. Esta planta ha invadido el embalse, los canales de riego, las zonas de regadío y constituye una importantísima amenaza para los agricultores, pero también para las comunidades locales. ¿De acuerdo? Hay muchos impactos negativos documentados, principalmente el bloqueo de los canales del agua, el incremento del riesgo de inundaciones con daños muy importantes en las comunidades locales. Los pescadores no pueden acceder a la pesca. La gente de los arroces, que es uno de los cultivos, el arroz es uno de los cultivos principales, también se ve amenazada y además estas grandes masas de tifa acogen unos pájaros que se llaman quelea, que son los vídeos que hay en internet son impresionantes porque atacan los cultivos, así es como una masa que se mueve y atacan los cultivos y diezman las cosechas en cuestión de 30 segundos, ¿no? También está relacionado con la presencia de mosquitos y malaria y mayor incidencia de malaria. Así que el reto, por otro lado, llevan años invirtiendo grandes sumas de dinero para intentar controlar esta mala hierba, para erradicarla y extraerla, tanto con maquinarias por parte del Gobierno federal como las comunidades de usuarios. Sin embargo, con poco éxito hasta la fecha. Entonces, esto marca la naturaleza de nuestro proyecto, que como puse en el título vamos a convertir esta amenaza en oportunidades para la gente local. Y aquí es donde, en la génesis del proyecto, también participa el profesor Kong, que tiene una importante patente y mucha experiencia en desarrollar tecnologías para producir biogás a partir de distintos productos vegetales, ¿no? de residuos vegetales, y también para producir silos. Bueno, yo ya sé que estoy como estamos en una escuela de ingenieros, agrónomos, pero un poquito, una pequeña ilustración, sobre todo los que sois del norte en España, habéis viajado, sabéis lo que son los ensilados, que es un sistema para preservar los forrajes verdes en condiciones anaeróbicas, con un procedimiento a veces con aditivos y con una serie de meses. Hay un proceso de descomposición anaeróbica que permite preservar ese forraje y aumentar su digestibilidad. Y la segunda parte, de la que además os hablará también ahora en su ponencia el profesor Kong, de la Universidad de Maryland, consiste en usar estas grandes masas de tifa para producir biogás. Esta es la zona de estudio. Fijaros, estamos allí, pequeñito, quizá me ha quedado muy pequeñito ese gráfico, donde está Nigeria, y estamos justo en el norte de Nigeria. Ahí en la zona grande veis cómo son los ríos, donde se han desarrollado esas presas y estos sistemas de riego. Fijaros que además confluyen, se ve que hay ahí como unos grandes humedales, que son los humedales, los Unguru Wetlands, Y fijaros que además que convergen, ahí se ve en la esquinita, al lago Chad, que como sabéis también está en graves problemas porque ha disminuido los recursos hídricos que llegan. Así que esta es nuestra zona de estudio, está ahí en el norte, es África subsahariana, forma parte del Sahel y tiene una época seca muy dura y muy importante. Ese es el motivo por el que se crean esas presas y se promueven los regadíos. Esta es la foto de la tifa o cattail de la NEA, que muchos de ellos reconoceréis por ese puro característico que tienen en la punta. Estas son algunas fotos de la invasión de tifa y estas no son, digamos, no pude encontrar todas, pero no son de las más impresionantes, pero veis ahí cómo tienen problemas para entrar bloquean todos los accesos, dificultan el paso del agua en los canales e infestan la mala hierba. Esta es una imagen satélite que han desarrollado en una colaboración que iremos mencionando. Este proyecto hemos tenido la suerte de que nos han financiado la UPM con los fondos de cooperación. Hemos constituido la plataforma África y distintos grupos de investigadores de la UPM, no solamente de agrónomos, se han incorporado, digamos, a colaborar con este proyecto y han ido haciendo importantes contribuciones, algunas las iré mencionando. Esta, por ejemplo, que os enseño para que veáis en vista satélite, esa zona toda como color fucsia es la identificación de la tifa. Este es un trabajo que han hecho Ana Tarquis y David Rivas y que han aplicado, hemos conseguido una beca, digamos, unos fondos para comprar imágenes de alta calidad del WorldView, el satélite de WorldView, y han desarrollado pues, con algoritmos para tratamiento de Big Data, pues han desarrollado esta clasificación, identificación de la tifa. Yo creo que es además una línea de investigación muy interesante, la explotación del Big Data para evaluar esto. Así que, bueno, el objetivo de nuestro proyecto, como os decía, intenta convertir esta amenaza en oportunidades y concretamente para producir biogás y para animal feed. El objetivo de esta investigación que yo presento ahora, y porque deciros que nuestro equipo de la UPM coordina y lleva toda la parte socioeconómica del proyecto, de la implementación. Y el objetivo es evaluar la disposición a adoptar estas nuevas tecnologías de silo y de biogás por parte de los agricultores, identificar barreras y restricciones y obtener un feedback que nos ayude a mejorar el desarrollo del proyecto y la futura adopción de esta tecnología. Vaya. Aquí está. Bueno, una característica de nuestro proyecto es que el enfoque es un action research, o lo que se llama también investigación participativa, que quiere decir que desde el día 1 los stakeholders, los afectados, tienen que estar involucrados en el proyecto, ¿vale? Y en definir el proyecto. Ya no vale lo de llegar al final de los 3 años con un producto hecho. Entonces, bueno, nuestro enfoque, hemos usado focus group y una metodología que se llama Fuzzy Cognitive Mapping, que ha sido extensamente o está siendo utilizada ampliamente en este tipo de investigaciones participativas y que es una metodología bastante flexible que te permiten desarrollar como mapas mentales que se construyen y representan las percepciones de los afectados. ¿Vale? Con lo cual, esta es interesante, sobre todo yo creo que además en el contexto de la adopción, donde realmente el stakeholder está en el centro, ¿no? Se rodea de esas características del ecosistema. Esta metodología también tiene un futuro desarrollo que es el que vamos a utilizar, que es el que incorpora Costco, casi en los 90, que incorpora la incertidumbre, es lo que en este tipo de mapas cognitivos incorpora la incertidumbre y se llaman con estructuras de fuzzy, como de imágenes borrosas, para reflejar esa posible incertidumbre en los datos y se llaman Fuzzy Cognitive Mapping. ¿Vale? Esta es una metodología interesante. Veo que hay muchos alumnos de máster aquí para el análisis de muchos problemas ambientales y de agroambientales y agrícolas, donde la participación de los beneficiarios o involucrados, todos los agentes, es importante. Bueno, un pequeño y simple ejemplo del cognitive mapping, para que sepamos de qué hablamos. Se trata de identificar variables clave en el sistema y establecer, a través de enlaces, cuantificar o hacer de forma semi-cuantitativa las relaciones causales que existen entre ellos. A partir de ahí se crea esa matriz de adyacencia que está formada por esos coeficientes que reflejan las relaciones causales entre las distintas variables. Nos permitirá obtener una serie de métricas, como es el in degree, el out degree y el grado de centralidad, que nos indican, el in degree te indica hasta qué punto son potenciales fuerzrzas determinantes del sistema, qué grado de influencia tienen y reciben de otras variables, y el out degree, qué grado de influencia tienen sobre otras variables. El índice de centralidad lo que viene a reflejar es la importancia de la variable en el sistema. Bueno, es decir que para aplicar este enfoque lo que hemos hecho es grupos de discusión. Con todos los potenciales beneficiarios, casi 69 beneficiarios, hicimos especial énfasis en tener mujeres, conseguimos un 49% de representación de mujeres dentro de nuestros focus group. Previamente a tener los focus group hicimos un taller de bienvenida donde presentamos nuestro proyecto y seguidamente conducimos las discusiones. Los hombres y las mujeres se dividieron en grupos distintos debido a razones culturales y los grupos se mantuvieron discusiones en Hausa, que es el idioma local, y tuvieron una duración de 40 a 50 minutos y fueron dirigidas con un cuestionario semiestructurado, que iba orientado, como he dicho antes, a identificar variables clave, a identificar barreras, a identificar oportunidades para un desarrollo exitoso del proyecto. Esta información fue después complementada con el desarrollo de unos interviews, de encuestas personales a los fulanis, que es un grupo local que son ganaderos transhumantes, que hacen toda la transhumancia por el África subsahariana. Y también con revisión de literatura. Bueno, esto es una foto de nuestro taller de bienvenida. Ahí estamos con los focus group de las mujeres. También tuvimos una buena recepción con los hombres. Estos son las entrevistas cara a cara que hicimos con los fulani. Un poquito hablaros de los resultados y para no extenderme voy a saltarme un poco la parte más metodológica del mapa e ir un poco a los resultados, porque yo creo que lo importante es que hablen todos mis dos colegas. Bueno, los resultados sí nos permiten evaluar cuáles son las variables que tienen mayor importancia. En este caso, bueno, como cabría esperar, la adopción de TIFA está en el centro del ecosistema que dibujan los stakeholders. Bueno, hay que decir que estos mapas los hemos hecho en dos etapas, dadas las características de los stakeholders y la situación. Primero condujimos las discusiones, recogimos los resultados y con ellos construimos, en función de las veces que mencionaban determinadas variables y las relaciones causales que establecían, fue como construimos estos Fuzzy Cognitive Mapping. Pues como decía, ¿cuáles variables presentan un índice de centralidad más alto y que indican que son las más relevantes? Las actividades de ganadería, la adopción de TIFA, la invasión de TIFA y los sistemas de riego. Fijaros en los drivers, que son los que están en azules, los que realmente tienen mucha influencia sobre otras variables, pero no reciben influencia ellos. Está el cambio en el régimen del agua, que efectivamente es uno de los principales drivers de la invasión de TIFA. Se ha pasado a mantener un flujo constante de agua en vez de estar como en los flujos naturales, que había inundaciones y sequías. Y claro, en la sequía la tifa, que es una planta acuática, tiene dificultades para crecer. Hacer estas presas, bueno, pues es uno de las causas. Eso, junto con la fertilización y las altas tasas de población, de crecimiento sin depuración. Entre los principales receivers, o sea, es decir, variables que reflejan los impactos, encontramos, como vemos, el bienestar, los ingresos, el nomadismo, los nómadas y conflictos que tienen con los agricultores y el gasto público ligado a... Bueno, dejadme comentar un poco estos resultados. Lo primero que hay que destacar es que las comunidades locales en Jadea Valley se caracterizan por un nivel de extrema pobreza, que viven por debajo de los $2 al día. Y en estas comunidades la ganadería se considera una medida de la riqueza y es además una estrategia para la gestión del riesgo. Cuando la familia se enfrenta con cualquier amenaza, ya sea una amenaza climática, pérdida de cosecha, enfermedades, tienen el ganado, venden alguna cabeza de ganado y eso les permite afrontar esos shocks. Así que el ganado tiene muchas facetas. Lo que nos sale es que, efectivamente, que los altos precios y la baja disponibilidad de alimentos durante la época seca, son uno de los principales retos que tienen las actividades ganaderas en esta zona. Lo que perciben ellos es que este silo de tifa les puede ayudar a mejorar la salud del animal y su nivel de producción durante la época seca. Y además también percibimos que ellos decían que para ellos sería una oportunidad para aumentar el tamaño de su cabaña de ganado, ¿no?, que se ven obligados a vender y a reducir durante la época seca. En general, todos los participantes, tanto hombres como mujeres, reflejaron una alta disposición a adaptar y destacamos que para las mujeres es una cuestión importante porque las mujeres tienen limitadas posibilidades de trabajar, de autonomía, pero lo que sí tienen son cabras y ovejas, sobre todo cabras, y de lo que viven es de la leche y de los productos lácteos que hacen. Así que, bueno, esto lo digo porque, como veréis, esto del empoderamiento de las mujeres va a ser también uno de los focos importantes, intentar hacer un poco huella, dando dentro de este proyecto, intentando que sirva para empoderar a las mujeres. Por otro lado, el proyecto TIFA decían que sus principales, digamos, preocupaciones o barreras eran la calidad y la seguridad de ese alimento. No están acostumbrados a tomar tifa, a aprovechar la tifa, lo hacen cuando solamente es muy jovencita. También estaban preocupados por su capacidad para comprar la tecnología, para mantenerla y para aprender a manejar la tecnología. ¿Vale? Tenemos resultados que nos sugieren, y esto es importante para el desarrollo del proyecto, y es que existen fuertes lazos sociales, lo que se llama capital social en economía, dentro de las comunidades. Y como decía, los impactos esperados pues, van a ser sobre el bienestar, sobre los ingresos, también sobre la nutrición, y en particular va a afectar a las mujeres. Ahí tenemos el ganado que realmente se queda luego todo marrón. Estos son ganaderas fulani. Así que, ¿cómo he dicho ahora? ¿Y cómo tenemos el feedback? ¿Qué feedback tenemos a partir de estos resultados para nuestro proyecto? Pues bueno, desde luego, reforzar muchísimo las unidades de demostración, que van a ser la siguiente etapa en nuestro proyecto, prestar particular atención a lo que hemos llamado el no-ill effect, los asuntos de seguridad. Están muy preocupados porque la tifa haga que sus animales se pongan malos. Muy importante, vamos a intentar promover la adopción temprana, el early adoption, por los leading farmers. y hay unos fuertes lazos de capital social, los tenemos que aprovechar y enfocarnos en promover los primeros pasos con farmers que sean pioneros y luego descansar un poco más en el peer-to-peer, ¿no? En el contacto de uno a otro, porque nos mostraban como que para ellos era muy importante como vía de comunicación aprender de lo que hacen sus colegas. La principal ventaja de este proyecto es la disponibilidad de forraje, pero en la época seca. En la época húmeda hay abundancia de hierba no hay problemas de hierba. Destacar, bueno, aquí que el reto para el proyecto de mejorar el valor nutritivo de este forraje sin incrementar los costes y usando materiales locales. También quiero señalar aquí, aparte de todos nuestros partners, la colaboración de un estudiante de Nigeria, que hemos tenido un estudiante de máster que estaba haciendo una estancia con nosotros, Rufai, y que ha trabajado con Trinidad Evans, Dolores Carro, que es la profesora de producción animal, y Fernando Escribano. Bueno, una de nuestras propuestas es, a partir, si os recordáis ese mapa, es crear bancos de tifa, hemos llamado bancos de tifa, es decir, donde hay esas grandes concentraciones de masa, lo que proponemos es hacer grandes bancos de tifa que actúen y se gestionen por los ganaderos como si fueran como las reservas de pastoreo comunes. Y, en cambio, nos hacemos también la pregunta de cómo puede, con estos resultados, cómo puede nuestro proyecto hacer impacto en las mujeres. Y lo que hemos propuesto a la parte más técnica es que también se enfoquen no solamente en promover los grandes silos, sino que vamos a elaborar pequeñas bolsas más manejables, de 100 kilos o menos de silo, que sean más fáciles para las mujeres que tienen las cabras estabuladas muy cerca de sus viviendas. ¿De acuerdo? Ya para terminar, unos pequeños resultados sobre el biogás directamente. Destacar que la pobreza energética es muy alta. El 90%, más del 90% de los que participaban en nuestros focus group no tenían acceso a electricidad y en su mayoría usaban leña para cocinar. Este gran uso de leña en las condiciones de unas tasas de población muy altas de crecimiento, lo que está originando es un uso insostenible de los recursos excesivo y causando deforestación. Y eso además se demuestra en que cada vez hay más escasez de leña y que el precio va subiendo, con lo cual además de los aspectos, por supuesto, medioambientales, también está afectando a los ingresos de las personas. Vimos que las mujeres estaban particularmente interesadas en el biogás y que se quejaban de problemas respiratorios, problemas en los ojos y también que les gustaba una cocina limpia y rápida. Realmente, cuando nos fuimos a la literatura, porque nuestro foco estaba siempre en erradicar la tifa y dar incentivos económicos a la gente a que la usara, ¿no? Entonces empezamos a descubrir estos impactos positivos y, por ejemplo, un informe de 2012 de la Organización Mundial de la Salud pone de manifiesto que los zumos de las cocinas de leña es la tercera causa de muerte en Nigeria, solo por detrás de la malaria y del SIDA, causando 95.000 muertes al año, que además afectan a mujeres y a niños. También ha sido interesante ver, y esto es otra cosa que tenemos que aprovechar, es que las mujeres identificaron el tener energía, el tener este biogás, como una posibilidad para desarrollar negocios. Así que los hombres también mostraron interés, pero he de decir que algo menos y además sobre todo enfocado en el ahorro, más enfocado en el ahorro de costes y que los principales, digamos, preocupaciones, retos o barreras a la adopción estaban relacionadas, por supuesto, con la capacidad para comprar la tecnología, para mantenerla y para aprender cómo usarla. Este es nuestro grupo de mujeres que visitamos en una aldea y en este caso ya unas recomendaciones finales y con esto termino, es adoptar lo que hemos llamado el TIFA Added Value Chain, una cadena de valor añadido a la TIFA en la que se forme pues, un comité en las que reunamos a todos los stakeholders involucrados, ¿de acuerdo? Empezando por la Agencia de Agua, que maneja las grandes infraestructuras, los regantes, las comunidades de riego que se están empezando a formar, que manejan los canales, los regantes, los ganaderos, las asociaciones de mujeres, los suministradores locales de plásticos o de inputs que sean necesarios para hacer esto. Señalar también que una línea que hemos emprendido y que ha sido también otra colaboración que se ha añadido al proyecto es que acabamos de terminar un análisis de ciclo de vida para evaluar el potencial de mitigación de CO2 de este proyecto con el ánimo de encontrar fondos externos de agencias externas ligadas a cambio climático, como es el Fondo Verde del Clima, que es un fondo internacional que tiene fondos para financiar proyectos que tengan impactos en términos de emisiones de CO2. Esto ha sido un trabajo colaborativo en el que ya aprovecho para agradecer el trabajo y la tesis de Vanessa Frutos, que está aquí sentada. Ha hecho su tesis, esto constituye su tesis de máster, que acaba de tener una excelente calificación. Y también de Eduardo Aguilera, que es un investigador visitante, y conmigo también. Vale. Y ya para terminar, señalar que, bueno, destacar los impactos del proyecto sobre distintos objetivos de desarrollo sostenible, hambre cero, fin de la pobreza, energía asequible y no contaminante, acción por el clima, igualdad de género y salud y bienestar. Pues nada, muchas gracias y yo creo que ahora dejo la palabra a mis colegas. María José.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Professor M.K. Othman, the Executive Director of National Agricultural Extension and Fertilizer Services. The title of the paper, A Roadmap to Sustainable Agriculture in Nigeria. As a way of, this is the outline of the presentation. Now, as a way of introduction, Nigeria is one of the countries in West Africa, and it's one of the 54 countries in Africa. It's the largest country in Africa. It was colonized by the British, and the amalgamation was done in 1914. And in 1960, the country gained independence. At the time of the independence, the country was just 43 million people. And presently, the country has over 200 million people. What it means is that there has been a change of over 400% from the time the country got independence to today. And the rate of increase in population, in Nigeria, hourly, we have an estimate of about 850 babies being born. And we have about 280 people dying, giving us, a population increase of 570 per hour. The country, the way it's moving, in the next 10 years, Nigeria will be over 260 million. And by the year 2040, Nigeria will be over 400 million people. And it will be the third most populous country in the world, after India and China. This really gives us the challenge that is accompanied with demography, because there's issue of food security. And the country as of today has about 91 million hectares of land. And out of this 91 million hectares of land, only about 50 is being cultivated. Unfortunately, the life expectancy of the country, because of the large population, because of several other challenges that perhaps we will see later, the life expectancy is just about 47.6 years, which is far less than the global average of 70. And then the literacy is 59.6%. In fact, when you look at other countries in Africa, Nigeria has the highest literacy level. And in fact, in America, the foreigners who have the highest number of graduates in America are Nigerians. Again, let's now look at the status of agriculture, because I'm going to talk about agriculture and how it's going to be sustainable. So what was it in the early 60s and what is today and what is likely going to happen? That's the whole focus of this paper. Now, in the 60s, Nigerian agriculture was booming and was contributing about 65% of the GDP. There were lots of agricultural commodities being exported from the country. But at the same period, the Nigerian oil, of course, was discovered in the late 50s. So by the 60s, it was fully developed. And the economy was more or less dependent on oil. And that actually made the country not to pay much attention on agriculture. So the contribution of the GDP by agriculture nosedived to only about 2% by the year 2000. And again, the contribution of agriculture generally, as of today, it employs over 70% of the active population and sustains about 86% of rural household. But most of these are more or less what we call peasantry farming, whereby people farm just to produce food for home and perhaps very little for sale. But still, the agriculture is the largest supplier of food to the country. Even though, with the population, there are a lot of importation of agricultural commodities into the country. Now, looking at the potential, Nigeria has a lot of potential. In fact, when you compare to several other countries, Nigeria is on the top. One, like I mentioned, it has 91 million hectares of land that are arable. And it has more than 171 dams owned by the federal government, and there are several other small dams that are scattered all over the country. And then it has extensive river system that cut across all the nook and crannies of the country. And it has 7 different distinct climates. And this river, especially River Niger, which is the 3rd biggest river in Africa, is contributing or discharging about 5,589 million cubic of water per second into Atlantic Ocean. And this water is cutting across. River Niger cut across over 7 countries and discharged into Atlantic Ocean through the country. And with the River Niger also, there are several other tributaries that cut across the country, some of them starting within the country, some of them outside the country. And all these, contribute into the Atlantic, and they are also making available water to the country. In fact, this is the agroecological zones. The country is divided into agroecological zones. And this is the map of the zone. And in Nigeria, in terms of water, the minimum amount of water that is being received in a given area is about 700 millimeters, while we can also receive as much as 4,000 millimeters of rainfall in a year. What it means is that you have a range of amount of water between 700 millimeters to 4,000 millimeters of rainfall that allows the production of several over hundreds agricultural commodities. This is a very big potential that in Africa, not only in Africa, all over the world, very few countries that have this. Then, similarly, another strain when it comes to the issue of agriculture in Nigeria, under the federal government, we have what is called Agriculture Research Institute. And this Agriculture Research Institute, they were given different commodities to mandate commodities to develop genetically and improve such genetic of such commodities. And then, so these are the mandates, genetic improvement of mandate crops, as well as develop of improved production, processing, and utilization of technology for their mandate crop. So this 18 research institutes, they have more than 5,000 scientists that are working on different agricultural commodities across the nation, and they are scattered all over the country. So these are a very big strength, and can actually, if it's fully harnessed, can really, create a sustainable agriculture in the country. This is the same that I'm talking about, and in addition to the community-based research institute, we also have what you call service research institute. Service like NRLS, National Agriculture Extension Research Service, where I'm heading. It actually mandated to advance the frontiers of agricultural extension in the country. Extension, of course, means that taking the technology from where it has been developed, packaging the technology, and disseminate to the people who are going to use the technology, and then take the feedback of this technology to the research centers. So we also have other, like agri-mechanization, National Center for Agri-Mechanization, that have mandate for, developing appropriate technology and machinery for agriculture in the country. And then there's also others, that's another one that is National Veterinary Research Institute that has been given the mandate to identify animal diseases, develop their treatment and control, and then production of animal vaccine against diseases. Now, with all this, we have a lot of challenges. One of the major challenges to agriculture in Nigeria is the issue of investment. The share of agriculture in federal government's annual budget, because the investment by federal government or by government, it comes through the annual budget that is actually being allocated to agriculture. So in the past, from 2000 to 2007, the share ranged between 1.3 to 7.4. And in 2017, the percentage of budget to agriculture was just about 1.8% total. So that means there's lack of course, there's lack of reliable data of some other investment, especially from the private sector. So the second other challenge is the issue of mechanization. I would like to quote Akinwumi Additional, the president of African Development Bank, who is also a Nigerian, a laureate of 2017 World Food Prize, who said, "An American farmer plays golf after I had this job, using mechanized farming equipment to achieve great success and prosperity, while our Nigerian farmers retire to their poor homes with little or nothing to show for a hard day's job, using their hoe and cutlasses. Some of the farmers in Nigeria leave their houses as early as 5 a.m., and they may come back around 7 p.m., but they hardly produce enough to feed their family, and hardly they can also use what they are producing to send their children to a good school." So that is what it is today because of the low mechanization. And to buttress this, the mechanization level in Nigeria, when you look at one of the indicators using the horsepower per hectare, is just about 0.03 horsepower per hectare against the recommended 1.5 horsepower per hectare for Africa, because of the nature of, agriculture production in Africa. My institute that has a mandate for, conducting survey, in 2013 we conducted a survey and found out that the number of tractors in the country, at that time, of course, the population was about 180 million, and we just got barely about 30,000 tractors, which, when you look at it, tractors is very small compared to the land that we're talking about, 91 million hectares, and you have 30,000. And then, in addition to that, most of these tractors were found to be broken. So, in short, you find that the tractors per hectare, you count about 10 tractors compared to even an African average, which is 22 per hectare, as recommended. And in fact, to cap it off, only about 5% of the farmers in Nigeria are accessible to are accessible to good seeds and be able to also utilize the seeds in terms of using them, in terms of planting space, in terms of type of seed to use. So another thing again, another challenge is the poor infrastructure. Our transportation system is very poor. The inadequate public institutions are there. Underdeveloped financial system, very high interest rate. People accessing loan, especially farmers, is still over 20% interest. So when farmers are hardly making enough profit from their production, and they are now asking them to pay about 22% interest, on the loan, it's quite very difficult for many of them to even think about loan. Then the issue of poor marketing information, ineffective extension system. When you look at the issue of livestock, you find that I will quickly give you some graph. You can see, if you look at beef, this is the demand and the demand, and this is what is available. So you find that apart from eggs, almost all commodities, they are actually in short supply, that they cannot meet the demand. And like I mentioned, this demand is increasing on daily basis. Similarly, when you look at the fishery, this is the production in metric ton, and the needs is far, almost twice what is available. Now, another issue of extension, that is a big challenge, is packaging this information and disseminating to poor farmers as a result of decreasing fund, limited capacity of the extension staff, high extension agent farmer ratio. What we used to do, or what was introduced in the country in the 70s, was what we call T&V, training and visit extension system, whereby every extension staff will actually service number of farmers. The recommended is one extension staff to about 800 farmers. But today, one extension staff has more than 17,000 farmers, which is quite very impracticable for such extension agent to service them. Again, when we look at also, just to summarize all these challenges, is when one look at the 2018 Goalkeepers Report, which was actually done by Bill and Melinda Gates. In that report, I'm quoting, Nigeria will have about 150 million people in extreme poverty out of projected population of over 400 million by the year 2050. Going by this figure, it means that Nigeria will represent about 36% of the total number of people in extreme poverty worldwide. And of course, extreme poverty here is referring to people living below line of $1.9 per day. So those challenges and the low productivity all actually resulted into this report, because this is a report of 2018 that is really not much different from what is today. Now, what's the way forward? Having now given you the potential, the challenges, analysis, the second thing is, what is the way forward? And in the way forward, we have to ask some questions. What should be done to change the current trend? What do we do to change it? And what do we do to change it? What should be done to increase agricultural productivity? What should be done to attain the potential productivity? And what should be done to build sustainable agriculture? That is the focus. That is exactly what I'm trying to focus, having told you where Nigeria is located, the number of people, the challenges, and the potential. Now, going by this, we need collective efforts targeting well-designed policy to address identified problems or issues. The first thing is who are the stakeholders that we need to work, and make collective efforts. On one part, the first part is government. We have three tiers of government, or three different governments. We have the federal government, we have state, we have local governments. So these three levels of government, and each of these levels, they have their own legislature. So there has to be concerted effort to actually address the issue of agriculture. Then the second very important stakeholder, group of stakeholders are researchers and extension partners. And then the third, which is also very important, is the educational institution. In the education institution, we have the primary, secondary, and tertiary level. And then the fourth, and all of them also very important, is the private sector. And that you have the farmers, you have the professors, you have the marketers, you have the investors, you have the internalists and exporters. So let's quickly see what each of this category of group is expected to do, so that at the end of the day, we can have a sustainable agriculture in Nigeria. One, issue of government. We talk about policy formulation. Government must formulate policy, very clear policy based on research. That research must be conducted, okay, what do we want? Increase production of this food, attain food security by a given period of time. What are the strategies to attain food security by this time? Okay? Then second, very important is government must increase investments. We have the Maputo Declaration that was done by the African Union in 2003. And in that, they all signed that they will be increasing their annual budget from whatever it was at that level to reach 10%. And in fact, in Africa, it's only one country that has reached up to 7 or 8%, and that is Rwanda. All other countries have not actually been investing as much as that, perhaps maybe South Africa. So, therefore, the government has to actually, increase this budget. Not only increase the budget, there also has to be timely release. Some of the issues that are also very challenging, especially in Nigeria, is that it's not only the budgetary allocation, but when is the money being released? As you all know, that agriculture is time-bound, and that if money is not released as at when due, then definitely there will be problem. Then there also has to be issue of regulations, then the issue of protection and security. You have to protect the investors. You have to protect the researchers. You have to protect everybody so that the atmosphere and the environment can be conducive for all the stakeholders to work for targeted purposes. And then there also has to be incentives and facilitation of local and foreign investment. Yes, the local investment has to actually be given necessary incentives. Similarly, the foreign investment in agriculture, because there is a huge amount of market, there's a huge amount of resources, and we need this investment. And for the investors to come, there has to be a kind of incentives and there has to be a kind of protection to be sure that, yes, whatever they're investing is going to be protected over a period of time. And then you also need partnership and synergy among all the tiers of government. The government, we're talking about, we have the legislative, we have the executive, and we have the judiciary, and as well as time, we have also 3 levels. We have the local, we have the state. So there has to be a kind of synergy, and concerted effort towards a purpose. Now, when it comes to the researchers, there are a lot of research works that have been on shelf in Nigeria today. Like I mentioned, we have more than 70 faculties of agriculture, and each of these faculties of agriculture, there are several PhD and master students that are actually currently undertaking research, all addressing one problem or the other. And they are, this is in addition to the research institutes that are in existence that are being funded by government. And most of these, there have been a lot of research results, but these research results are on shelf. They are not actually, many people are not aware of them. So, one, we have to catalog such researches and package them and disseminate them for utilization. Then there also has to be research coordination to address identified field problems. The research should be tailored such that it will address problems that have been identified from the field. And then there also has to be, initiate and conduct problem-solving research and in a participatory manner. And the issue of synergy is also very important. Still, we also need to go into, So still, we need to go into new technology that like biotech, nanotech, and so on. We need to go into that both for crop, livestock, And similarly, when it comes to the other parts, the extension personnel, there has to be a kind of proactive support to extension services, because whatever result that has been obtained by any research, if it cannot be disseminated to people who are going to use it, that research is useless. So there has to be that. Similarly, the use of ICT is very important now that we can leverage on the use of ICT to deliver extension services. In the past, the extension personnel need to be physically present in different places, but today, because of the issue of ICT, telephone-based and internet-based, you can reach out and pass the information and get feedback without physically being there. This is one of the ICT that we have where in NLS we're deploying. This is what we call a call center model, which is actually being utilized to receive calls from farmers, and this is the building. Now, coming back to the educational institutions, which is another very important stakeholders in this, we need to review agricultural curriculum in the country. We need to make sure that the practical is about 70%. Most of our curriculum, these are curriculums we inherited more than 50 years ago from our colonial masters. And they themselves have changed them. So we need to change them so that they can be practically oriented for agriculture. Then we also need to challenge some of the faculties to develop, to produce for themselves and produce for sale. And then we also have to make it compulsory for every student to have a successful demonstration club before he graduates. And then there has to be compulsory establishment of agriculture school in all public schools, so that agriculture can be initiated right from primary school and secondary school, that people can at least be aware of agriculture and its passion, not to be looking at agriculture as a punishment. Similarly, there has to be, concerted effort for funding of this by the 3 tiers of government, federal and state government, and there has to also be, facilitate, encourage, and support staff exchange between within and outside the country. And then coming back to another very important sector, which is the private sector, there has to be a lot of incentives for the private investment in agriculture, and there has to be deliberate encouragement and support of agripreneurship and capacity building for potential agripreneurs, especially among the youth and the women. You see, the average age of a farmer in Nigeria is about 47 years. And the percentage of the population, 70% of the population have age between 1 to 25 years. That means that there's a lot of problems. It means that youth are not being attracted into agriculture because of low mechanization, low agricultural mechanizations. Many people don't want to go and bend down and use cutlass to do farming. And at the end of the day, you produce very little. So there has to be a concerted effort to build the capacity of the farmers, especially the youth, and then make agriculture to be very attractive and be very, very profitable. Then we also have to provide single-digit interest loan for agriculture. Well, yes, okay, I also. So we need to support the development of agricultural machineries, both locally made as well as those that have to be imported. Now that the whole world is a global village, so whatever technology that is imported, we can also use it, and then encourage others to come and invest to produce some of the technology that will, address our problems. In conclusion, the need to make agriculture sustainable in the face of population explosion and climate change cannot be overemphasized. This is very important if we are going to be, to prevent Nigeria being the headquarters of, extreme poverty by the 2030, as prophesied by goalkeepers. Then we need to work hard. We need to see how we can actually prevent that to happen. And making agriculture to be sustainable in Nigeria is a Herculean task that requires the effort of both government and private sectors. Luckily, the technology being developed within Nigeria and in foreign countries will be handy to achieve this objective. Thank you very much. Gracias.
Thank you very much, Dr. Othman. I think it's very important to have or to follow this TIFA project, because one of the objectives is the women empowerment, and I think the best way to decrease or not to increase so much the natality is the women empowerment. When we decide how many children have, probably we don't have so many children. And as one of announcement in Mexico says, the little family lives better than the family with a lot of children. So I think we have to improve agriculture, but also I think we have to decrease the rate of population. Because it would be a miracle to obtain so many food for people. Yeah. Okay, for ending, the Professor Richard Kohn will talk about innovation in smart rural development, the third generation of biofuels.
Okay, this one. Can everybody hear me? This one doesn't seem. Okay. Does this one work? No. No, not at all? It's fine? Oh, that's to that. Ah, I got it. So it doesn't matter. And this one, do you guys hear me from this? Better? Okay, I'll try to. We have a lot of microphones. I feel like I'm being interviewed by the CNN or something, all these. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a bit more technical aspects, biological, physical sorts of aspects of this project, and also about some of the novel things that we've discovered, so what we're calling that third generation. We've been working on getting to the third generation of biofuel for quite a while, and we're not quite there, but I do think we have made, in our lab, a bit of an improvement. And, okay, I just ruined it. Okay, there we go. So how many of you are familiar already with biogas production? Anybody? Few people. So I'm going to give a little bit of a review, but the basic idea is that if you take organic matter and you exclude oxygen from it, generally, as long as there are bacteria present and the requirements for growth of the bacteria, they'll grow, they use up all the oxygen that's initially there, and then they start looking for, how many people here have background in chemistry? I'll get an idea who I'm talking to. Okay, not too many. Okay, so basically what happens is you end up having extra hydrogen. And, you know, hydrogen needs to find a place to go, and so it looks for, it normally would like to donate, the hydrogen would like to be donated to oxygen to make water, and that is a way the reaction wants to go. Well, it can't find any oxygen because it got all used up. So it starts looking for some other place to put that hydrogen, and what it does is it takes the carbon dioxide that's in the environment, and it'll add the hydrogen to that. That makes methane. So what we're doing is we're basically just keeping air out and keeping the conditions right so that you make methane start to bubble out of the system. And then you can enter your biomass in slowly and keep producing this methane. Well, methane is the flammable ingredient in natural gas, which was made probably by a process similar to this long ago and stored in the earth. So you can burn this and get heat from it. So here the process is you have a complex organic matter, which can be protein, carbohydrates such as fiber. It can be basically anything that already has some oxygen in it, so it doesn't really count. Some material that's hard to digest. But you add this material and you have a lot of water, and it gets degraded to what are called volatile fatty acids. And these are, for example, the most common one and the most abundant is acetate, which is the acid that's in vinegar. This acid is then degraded to hydrogen and carbon dioxide, and the hydrogen and the carbon dioxide are used to make the methane. Sometimes they can be degraded directly to these acetic acid, they call it, so acetic acid or acetate, and it can be in step 4 here, can go in directly to methane and CO2. So that's the process. And what we want to do is optimize this process. This has been around for hundreds of years, been used all over the world. And it isn't used nearly as much as one would think it would be for treating a lot of waste biomass that we have. So what do you need, just to review? You need anaerobic, meaning an environment that doesn't have oxygen coming in all the time. Otherwise, you just make water instead of making methane. You need to be able to collect the gas and store it. You need a source of biomass. So waste biomass is typically used. And you need all the nutrients that are required for the microbes, like water, the organic biomass, that's the energy source for the microbes to grow on, and available nitrogen, like ammonia, which they will convert into their protein. And then you need microbes. But the microbes are pretty easy to find. They're in the environment all over the place. And a lot of times, if you just incubate long enough, they'll come up. But some are better than others. And so one of the innovations that we are using is getting microbes from the cow, rumen of a cow, with the first stomach chamber, because they're especially effective at rapidly degrading materials. And they, as you've probably heard in the mainstream media, they do have some methanogens there as well. So how big a digester? The biggest cost problem with this is that it needs to be fairly large in order to work. And so most of the cost of building these digesters is material cost. So you don't want to make a bigger one than you really need. And so how big do you need? Well, how much gas do you need to produce? How fast can you digest the biomass? How fast can you convert those acids into methane? And if you're going to do this faster, then you're going to need if you can do it faster, you can use a smaller digester and save lots of money. And in order to do it faster, you have to understand that the methanogens, these are the bacteria, they're actually not bacteria, but they're smaller than a bacteria and simpler. But these bugs, we'll call them bugs, they need to be able to grow fast enough to not get washed out of the whole system. And as they get washed out of the system, when you increase the rate of flow through the system, they get washed out. When they get washed out, they become less efficient. And so the hydrogen levels get a little higher, and it changes the whole chemistry of the system so that it's not as efficient. And you need the biomass. I said we were using TIFA, and one of the things that we looked at is the maturity of the TIFA, which does slow things down, but not so much that we can't use it if it becomes more mature. So efficiency. What we were talking about, this trade-off of the reaction going as fast as you can to make it to produce as much gas as possible with the smallest volume that you can have, but the trade-off is efficiency. And what I mean by efficiency in this system, it's how much a fraction or a percentage of the biomass that's converted to methane. So 100% efficient means all of the biomass becomes methane. That isn't going to happen because certain parts aren't converted. First of all, in the end, there's always going to be some undigested biomass. If it's never digested, converted into acids, it can never become methane. And then you'll have some of the acids that are going to flow out with the liquid. So think about how would you control that? Well, if the concentration of the acid is higher, then as a little bit of the liquid flows out, more acid is going to be in that liquid. So it's proportional to the concentration. And then you also have the inefficiency of oxidized acids, which basically is if you have air coming into the system, then you're going to lose some of that methane and you're going to make water instead. And water is not really very useful. It's very useful, of course, but it's not useful as an energy source because it's very stable. So the faster flow rates mean lower efficiency because there's less time for the digestion of the biomass. There's less time to convert all the acids into methane or to degrade the acids, and there's lower activity of the bugs that do this process because they get washed out. So what we see is what really happens in a digester is, back to this picture here again, you have this one step where you have at the bottom, you have this methane and this carbon dioxide, which builds up to a certain extent. And as this builds up, it's going to inhibit its degradation of the acids. So they become inhibited. So that means the acids build up. And when the acids build up, then they can inhibit the whole digestion process. So what really is happening is this one step, the buildup of methane and carbon dioxide, is really limiting the whole rate of the process. So what do we do? Well, we take the methane and carbon dioxide out as it's produced. But we do that by letting the pressure be a little bit higher than atmospheric pressure. And we don't think of that as a buildup because it's atmospheric pressure, right? That's not pressure. Well, it is pressure if you're a bacteria, okay? So what's the absence of pressure? Vacuum. And so it's going to work differently if you have it under vacuum than if you have it under pressure. So I'll show you. But we'll come back to this. I'll show you a few of the experiments we did with TIFA. This person here is Nura Saleh, who was a student who worked with us for 6 months from Nigeria, a very hardworking student who came to learn some of these techniques so he could take them back to Nigeria. He's working with some TIFA. We have our own plot of TIFA, which is part of a system that some of the ag engineers established for actually cleaning water from the chemistry building, which had some things that were certain contaminants, but they weren't real serious contaminants, but nutrients and things like that that they wanted to get out of the water before it went to surface water. So they created this artificial wetland, and we could use the TIFA from that. So it's a different species, but it demonstrates a lot of the processes. This item here on the top right dries the TIFA very quickly, so you can see the dry matter percentage. It was one of the things that we worked with here. And so we take this TIFA and take the TIFA also from Africa, grind it, dry it, and then conduct in vitro experiments where we have balloons, mylar balloons, that trap the gas, and so we can measure the gases. Everybody thinks we're partying all the time because we always have balloons all over the place, ranging from small to huge. And we try to make it a little bit fun, so we have different sayings on them, you know, it's a boy, good luck, you know, whatever we can find. But basically, one of the experiments shown here shows that we took the plant apart, and we looked at the different parts. So the whole plant versus the spike, the leaf, the stem, you know, the root, and just see how much gas we could get, and look at the methane content of the gas, just to see how these things varied. And basically, you can make gas out of pretty much any part of the plant. And then we looked at the maturity. We looked at 5 different stages of maturity, and initially we found that the maturity had a huge effect and that we needed to take it fairly immature in order to get a decent digestion. However, we have since found that we could really digest the TIFA a lot better once the microbes that we had were adapted to it, which took a few months. But now we're actually getting better digestion rates than this. And we look at the loading rate, which is how fast, you know, so this is to answer that question of how big does the digester need to be when we're putting it on the ground in Nigeria. So we looked at, well, how much gas can you produce? How fast can you feed it? The faster you feed it, of course, it's going to become less efficient. This is at an early stage. It actually, if you just divided the methane by the biogas, you would see that's a pretty low percentage, but that's because we're starting with much higher concentrations of carbon dioxide. We haven't really gotten to the point where it's generating about 50, 60% methane. But the relative differences are important. So what happens is, you know, if you double the rate of loading of the TIFA, you should double the amount of gas you produce. And you're not seeing that here. So you're seeing, you know, initially we're not getting, you know, we're losing efficiency. We're losing some of the gas by increasing the rate of flow. That also was something we got over, and we're now, at one point, we were looking at designing for about 0.4 grams per day load. Now we're up to, we're going to do that faster because now once these bugs are adapted, they actually can digest it faster than that. And we do get the doubling with every doubling of the biomass load. But there's something else coming up that I'm going to show you. This is a comparison from the literature from different studies that show approximately how much biogas you could produce per gram of what engineers call volatile solids, or dry matter, what nutritionists call dry matter, but the dry material, well, organic matter. And you see that the TIFA is actually very does very well in terms of how much gas can be produced. And it's because it is very digestible, but it has to be under the sort of conditions that we use to make it work this way. So now I want to do a little bit of chemistry. How many people remember chemistry? Everybody, right? Everybody raise your hand. Everybody's had it. Okay, so here we have 3 reactions, and I'm going to show you that it's really even only 2 reactions. But remember I said the acid, the acetic acid, could be converted to carbon dioxide and hydrogen, and the carbon dioxide and hydrogen can be converted to methane, or you could directly convert the acetic acid to methane. So those 3 reactions on the left. And each of those will go to an equilibrium if it approaches what's called thermodynamic equilibrium. And that means that there's a constant, that they'll go to concentrations such that there's a constant that's equal to the products divided by the reactants. So if we see the first equation, what you see is that when the methane and the hydrogen gets to a certain concentration, the acetate will get to a certain concentration. They'll go back and forth. As you increase acetate, you'll increase the hydrogen and the methane concentration, and vice versa. So think about these as, think of the math of it. It's just a proportion. They're constants. So they all approach equilibrium in the digester together. So what does that mean? What happens to the acetic acid concentration under vacuum as opposed to under atmospheric pressure? So think about this. These little bars mean concentration or pressure. So I'm going to show you an example. Some of you are going to see this already, right? Some of you are going to have to read the rest of the novel to get to that point. Okay, so here you have acetic acid is another one. I've got these 2 reactions. The K equilibrium, it turns out that I can solve the 2 equations together with simultaneous equations, and basically I still have a constant. It's now a constant times a constant, which is still a constant. And I have this ratio. So anybody think now, if the gas is there, CH4 is methane, CO2 is carbon dioxide. So those 2 gases multiplied together, their pressures multiplied together, times the water, which doesn't really change, has got to be equal to it's got to be proportional to the acetic acid concentration. So what happens if I take out, say, half of the methane and half of the CO2, what happens to the acetate concentration? I'm not going to tell you the answer yet. You're going to have to figure that out. But I'll show you, if I do this directly, I get that equation. Okay, so it's going to be that same question. All right, well, I'll give you a little more help. If I solve for acetic acid, how many people have had a math before? Okay, you guys are lying. Nobody's ever raises their hand. Okay, so everybody remembers that if this is my acetic acid concentration. You can see I just rearranged that equation. And so now at 1 atmospheric pressure, my acetic acid concentration is equal to, well, if I've got 50-50 methane and carbon dioxide in my gas, then it's half an atmosphere of methane and half of an atmosphere of carbon dioxide. So I multiply these 2 numbers together and I get 0.25 divided by the equilibrium constant, which is a constant. So it's basically K times 0.25. Well, what if I put it under half of an atmospheric pressure? Now I've still got the 50-50 ratio, but now I've got 0.25 atmospheres and 0.25 atmospheres, so that's 0.125 over the same constant. My acetic acid concentration is half as high, right? So there's a new, it's not a new equilibrium, it's the same equilibrium, but it's half the acetic acid concentration. And it's even less than half of these other acids that get converted to acetic acid. So what's going to happen to my system if it's limited in this first step if it's limited by step 4 because of the accumulation of the methane and the CO2, well, it's not going to be limited. So when I put that under partial vacuum, I'm now going to increase the conversion of the acetic acid or the hydrogen and the carbon dioxide to the methane. And that means I'm going to decrease the acid in the acidity of the digester, and I'm going to increase the rate of degradation to produce more acid. And so partial vacuum increases methane production. So guess what? I got a patent for that. It's only valid in the United States, so you can do this all you want. Don't have to tell me. Outside the US. You can do it in the US too, but you know, legally you're supposed to tell me. but this is an example. What happens, this was a solution I put, the low line here, the bottom line is the control, just 1 atmosphere of pressure. The top line was reduced under vacuum. And that dashed blue line that says nitrogen, it was partially under nitrogen pressure. So it was that I had the same total pressure, but I took some of the CO2 so that I basically got the same amount of CO2 and methane pressure by substituting some of that for nitrogen. So it works the same way whether you're adding a different gas than if you put it under vacuum. What it does is it speeds up that process of degradation of the VFAs. So what does the lower gas pressure enable you to do? Well, you increase the degradation of the acids, which raises the pH. It decreases the acid concentration, which will actually decrease the washout of acid. In other words, it makes it more efficient. But it also will decrease the inhibition of the biomass degradation, so it makes it digest faster. And it increases the methanogen growth, which is also related to the fact that methanogens will have access to more hydrogen, because that's one of the things that I didn't show you, but the hydrogen also accommodates this, and then the methanogens grow faster. And because the methanogens grow faster, they bring the hydrogen concentration back down, which is what causes the acid to degrade. So all of this together allows you to basically change the system to be, looks like it's more efficient, but because it's more efficient, you can actually increase the organic flow rate and the fluid rate and not have all the problems of the inefficiency that you would have had. So you now can make your digester smaller and make this go faster. Now, there are other ways of doing this other than vacuum, as I showed the nitrogen, but you can also just change the ratio of carbon dioxide to methane. So by removing the carbon dioxide, that also speeds up the reaction by the same principle. So the last thing I was to say is that we also, so think about this, and you can do this just in your head. What happens if we increase the pressure in a reactor? Okay. We have several innovations where we actually make alcohols, longer chain alcohols like butanols, and we can even make hydrocarbons, and all of that was done by putting them under pressure, under hydrogen pressure. And we also inhibited some of the methanogens to get these other products. But the thing is, if you put something under pressure, you increase the concentration of all those liquid products. And so if you want to make ethanol, like cellulosic ethanol, or you want to convert gas, what they call electrofuel, you take carbon dioxide and you add electricity or hydrogen, and you can make fuels that way. You can do that under pressure. You actually increase all of these concentrations. So it's the opposite of what we did with the methane. And all of those things are part of the innovations that we were looking at. Here's a couple of examples of large-scale digesters. These would have been manure digesters, which is the main use in the United States. It's now just becoming really new to start using food waste, which is actually a much better source. And I was going to say that TIFA has a lot more energy that can be converted to methane than something like manure, which is what's used more commonly. And because with the TIFA, we're not really doing this to store the material the way we are with manure. It's actually better to use the type of innovation that I'm showing you, because the faster we can do this, we don't need to do it to store it. The faster we can do it, the smaller the digesters can be, and the more valuable, more of an advantage it is. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the key here is that we need, on the one hand, to put in contact the person that is developing the knowledge with the person that needs the application of this knowledge. So the debate I would like to center maybe is asking to Professor Ottman, how do you see, after 2 years of project cooperating with Professor Cohn, that these technology transfer is helping the objective? And what do you think is the worst or the most difficult challenge that we are having to make this transfer in an effective way?
Thank you very much, Professor Fernando, for discussion. I would like to say that there has been a very tremendous success in addressing the issue of taipa grass. Where the project is taking place, I've been there for almost 25 years. In fact, Hadiji Valley Irrigation Project, we implemented projects in 1993 up to 2001, which was sponsored by the French Embassy in Nigeria. And I'm one of the beneficiaries of that project because it's provided me an opportunity to do one of my masters in France, which made me to be able to speak a French language. Additional, opportunity for me to be able to speak two languages, English and French. And I know very well that at the time, no one of us was thinking about how to address the issue of taipa grass. And even when we saw the projects of how to address the issue of taipa, we did not even think of, going that direction, because the taipa grass is one weed that is an aquatic weed, but immediately you remove it, in the next 1 week, it will invade everywhere again. It's highly prolific, such that when you are removing, more are coming. So, and it kept on invading the places, and it was increasing yearly. From a small place, it kept on following that valley, that Hadejia Valley, Hadejia River, River Hadejia. River Hadejia is one river that drains into Lake Chad. So what it means is that, for the next maybe 500 to 600 kilometers will be embedded by this taipa, if nothing is happening. So today there's a solution. And that solution is converting this grass into animal feeds, and also converting it to produce energy. Because one major challenge in Nigeria that, of course, time did not permit me to talk about is the issue of energy. With about 200 million people that we have today, the energy production, electric energy production, is just about 4,000 megawatts of electricity. And if you compare 200 million people with 4,000 megawatts of electricity with about 60 or less than 60 million people in South Africa, they produce more than almost 70,000 megawatts. So the issue of energy is very important, and we are bringing it. And not only that, we are bringing it, it is going to be, utilized by individual household, which is the most important. Because, you see, the other methods of production is a bit complicated, that many households cannot think about it. But if we are, which we are doing, this biogas, by the time we will be able to perfect the technology and transfer it to the local technicians who can mass produce it at local level, I believe that will be a very tremendous achievement that will address, one, the issue of environment. It will also address the issue of energy. It will empower people with more energy. And then it will also address the issue of feed, especially during the dry season. Thank you. Yeah.
So, Professor Cohn, I would ask the audience if there is anybody who wants to ask a question. That's priority. So go ahead, raise your hand, please.
Okay, Richard, hello. I'm Carlos, a student here in this university, and I have a question, well, especially for you. I don't know how it's going to be or how it is supposed to be, the distribution of this gas this methane into each household here in Nigeria?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So, and also probably Professor Eva will want to respond, but what we want to do, we have two parts to this. One is to enable people to build small digesters that can power one household or maybe a couple of households. And so you would have a lot of these distributed around the country. And the other part is there is a demonstration of a slightly larger plant that could produce the fuel. But the model that's used in a lot of countries that have introduced this is having these small digesters where it becomes in your interest to take this whatever waste material you have and put it into it and then produce just enough for your family or for a few families. You want to finish, or did I cover it?
And bigger biodigesters. But from literature review, there is a trend to go to the family size. More efficient. Thank you. So,
One aspect here is that here size counts. I mean, the bigger, the more efficient. And here is where the challenge with the information, with the knowledge from the University of Maryland, Professor Cohn, he's telling that if we can increase the efficiency of the system, we can reduce the size and still produce enough biogas so households can use it. So in that sense, Professor Cohn, how do you see your knowledge can be applied under practical conditions? How can we reduce the pressure in the northern Nigerian households without electricity, without any power? How can you explain that?
Well, if you have, is this on? Yeah. Okay. If you have an airtight container, you can use a hand pump. It doesn't take a lot of technology to pull out the gas and create a partial pressure. You can also, but the problem with that is you may get leaking. But what I showed you also works by changing the ratio. So if you take out the gas and remove the carbon dioxide by running it through a base solution, let the remaining gas will be methane, the CO2 will be removed, and you push the methane back through, you can create conditions, for example, of having 90% methane and 10% CO2, which decreases your storage requirement because now it's just more potent. The burning part is still there. But it also will increase the digester efficiency because now you've changed, if you multiply 0.9 times 0.1, that's 0.09 instead of the 0.25 in the example before. So you're doing the same thing. You're going to have the acetate concentration decrease to half. And it really works exactly the same way.
Yeah, thank you very much because of the presentation. All the presentation were really interesting, and I already knew the project, but I have the feeling that each time I heard about it, I learned new things, and that you are growing really and advancing really fast and connecting different people and different research groups. So felicitation for this. And then I would like to know, because you addressed this thing of the problem of adoption, so, but very little. So if you can maybe talk about this a little bit more, that how are you going to address this challenge of adoption by communities and by families and by women? If you know which groups of people are you going to work on, and which, well, your ideas about this.
This technology with very high poverty people. So I found that in the focus group discussions, they were all, really interested in the technology and in adopting the technology and having the biogas. But from the literature review, I see that there are also other cultural barriers that maybe even the stakeholders are not around. You suggested one yourself, the cultural barriers. You have to change your way of cooking, and there is a lot of culture, the trust, not the same cooking in a cook stove and for hours with firewood that doing a clean cooking. So maybe we have to rely also on women associations. And that's why I thought that it's interesting to have to empower women for making business. For example, now we are trying to and have already established contacts with women cooperatives who do the parboiling of rice. And this is very interesting because you can use a big digester and do it with all the group. I think we have to be very serious with implementation because sometimes people is very welcoming, but then they don't do anything. So we have to provide incentives, positive incentives, and at the same time, if someone does not take care of the equipment, you have to move the equipment to other farmer or to other households. So we have to think about that, how to establish the correct incentives so that, because it's hard to be adoption of a novel technology. And of course, we have to rely on early adopters. And then people will see from each other, and I think that will come the late adopters after. Thank you.
Anybody else want to ask a question? I want to address that sitting on the front line, we have also Professor Adeosun and Professor Alao. Professor Adeosun is the team leader of the biogas work that is taking place at NRLS, where Professor Ottman is the chief executive officer or executive director, and also Professor Alao, who is the team leader for all the animal work, so that all the conversion of TIFA into silage. And the utilization and research done with animals is under his supervision. I tell you this because we will be here all this week. Maybe if any of you is interested in learning anything else, stop by at Segram, ask for us, ask for them, or keep in touch, and we are absolutely open to keep this project alive with your new inputs, and your new inputs are from ideas to work under supervision of professor at the university here, or even welcoming students from Nigeria, or if some of you are brave enough, moving to Nigeria for a short time, it could be also kind of interesting experience. So anyway, thank you for coming. Sorry for my delay at the start, but I'm sure that we will have a good feedback from you in the future.